Hi, welcome back everybody for lesson 3 on the Sew Easy 2. So today we're going to discuss using the Pro version, and I'm going to use Power Panto mode and quilt a beautiful edge-to-edge design all the way across my quilt. The other quilt I did a little more custom work because I quilted it a block at a time. This time I'm kind of making it an easier route. So you can see, this is my design that I created. My main focus is on the center block and how cool it looks. So I'm in the software. Notice I'm in the gold with the gold features. I'm going to tap on Pantograph. I'm going to open it up, and now we're setting our safe area. So for this quilt, notice I have excess on each side of my quilt, and you want this because I want to sew off the edges onto my quilt batting. And I'm not going to sew all the way off. I just want to place my safe area up at the top left. Now, there's a strict rule that you have to follow when it comes to the edge to edge. It's not true with this one. You're kind of making your own safe area up. So I'm moving up and off my quilt and up and off the top. And I'm tapping on where it says top left. Now I'm going to move across my quilt. Notice how much it's going to sew off the edges, and I'm going to pull it down as far as I can and tap on where it says bottom right. Okay, now I've set the parameters. So when we open up into the Pantograph screen, you'll see some extra functions and tools across the top. I want you to see the main window in the center, and then down below you'll see where it says select pattern, Panto mode, and then you'll find where it says sizing. Right under where it says sizing, you'll see 2 measurements. There's the total width and the total height. I want you to notice those. Those are your safe area parameters. So when it opens up, it's opening up using those parameters. Well, we're going to put our quilt size in, okay? So it's really important that you measure your quilt before you put it on the frame to get accurate measurements. All right, so I'm going to use my ruler to measure across the top, and then I'm going to put the length measurements in the total height. All right, so let's use our ruler. We're going to move off the top to give it some parameters of how wide we want it to quilt. And I usually set my pantographs so they quilt at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches, sometimes even 2 inches, depending on how dense the design is, and to prepare for fabric shrinkage. Fabric shrinkage is what happens as you're quilting because the back absorbs all that quilting, and all of a sudden your quilt becomes a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller, and that includes the backing more so than the top, because that's what is absorbing all those little stitches, okay? So we're going to start up here, and I've moved it to the left, and I'm going to tap on the ruler, the left side of the ruler. Okay, and you'll see I'm almost out of my safe area, but that's okay. I'm going to move across over here, and I'm going to make sure that my foot's off slightly, and I'm going to tap on the right side. And that's my measurement. So it's about 54.5. So that's what the measurement I'm going to use is 54.5. All right? Because I do want it to sew off the edges. And then the length is going to be 83. Okay? So I'm going to get back out of here. So my total width is 55 for my safe area. So I'm okay by putting 54.5 because that's a smaller amount than my safe area, and I can tap on OK. And now for my total height, that's the height or the length of your whole quilt. That's the measurement that you're going to put in. And just to be on the safe side, mine was 83. I'm going to put 95. Okay? because I want it to sew off the top and the bottom a few extra inches. So I'm just making a little allowances for that very bottom half. So I'm going to come in here and tap on 95 for my length. Okay, so see, that is my long old quilt, okay? So now I've set my parameters of how wide and how long my quilt is. Let's go select our design. So to select our design, you can do that in a couple of places. You'll see over here to the left of the screen, select pattern. There's also another select pattern right above it at the top where it says home. Right next to it is another place that you can select your design. So let's open it up. And we want to go to our edge-to-edge designs. Well, I designed a design specifically for this, and you can see some of the little designs I'm playing around with, and it is a spiral design, and we're gonna go find it. It's spiraling bubbles. I'm gonna open it up and see how dense it is. That's at 5 inches of pattern height, okay? So I kind of wanna make it, because it's a long quilt, a little larger. So I'm going to tap on it because we are using, and I can zoom in as well. So let's zoom in so you can see the design. See my cute little spiraling bubble? It's a very cute design that I'm just going to, I'm not even going to worry about spacing. For right now, I just want to make sure that I get it the right size. Now 9 inches, I want to think about 9 inches, so I'm going to grab my ruler here because it's a dense design going all the way across. So if I look at my ruler, and this is a good gauge for how you want it to sew out, that's 9 inches right here. So 8, 9. So this is 9 inches from here to here. And that probably would be okay. But I might want it a little more dense. So think about your quilt. I have a lot of negative space on this quilt, so a lot of blue. So maybe I want it a little bit more dense rather than so big. You could kind of figure it out. Whatever you want will work. So if I'm turning this around, 9 inches will kind of quilt right down to here. And that's probably good. All the way across my quilt. So I will just use the 9 inches, and I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to remember that. So as I'm quilting, I'm not going to make any more changes to this. I might want to add a little bit of space. And now we're going to sew in zones, okay? And when we tap on sew in zones, it's going to ask us if we want to save our design. And yes, you do, because you want to save the measurements. And yes. And then I'm going to put the name in. I'm going to put Tuesdays with Grace. Sew space easy. Okay, once I've typed in the name, I'm going to tap on the Enter button and then Save. Okay, now I can get out of this. So this is my first area across my quilt top that's going to sew. You'll notice that my settings are set for center placement. I don't like center placement. I'm not going to use center placement. I'm going to use 4-point. And so because center placement doesn't allow for me to roll unevenly, that's why I want to use 4-point. 4-point is going to give me better markings all the way down to allow or to compensate actually for that uneven rolling. All right, so I'm going to tap on Zone Manager and make some changes here. It's going to open up into Zone Manager, and in Zone Manager, let's talk about the Zone Manager screen. I want you to notice that right here in the center is our quilt. You can zoom in and zoom out, and it says we are starting out on Zone 1. If you use the arrows towards the bottom left of the screen, you can scroll through each of your zones. So I have several zones because it's a really long quilt, okay? That's okay, we'll just go back up to one, tap on one, get it changed. Now, let's talk about our zone preferences, okay? So right below where your quilt is laid out, you'll see a little section that says zone preferences. I'm going to change it from 1 point to 4 point. And then my zone start position, I can have it sew from the left consistently, or I can change it to alternate. So it can start from the left to the right and go back and forth all the way across, down my quilt. Then right below that, we can choose the sewing direction. I want it to sew continuous, but you can change those preferences as well. Sometimes there's a quilt that needs really accurate placement and sewing, so change it to uniform, or change it just to back and forth. But I'm going to have it sew continuous because we are sewing off the quilt edges. All right, so now I've changed all my settings, and I'm ready to go and make my marks and place my first zone. All right, I can just say, cancel out of this. All right, this is your placement screen. So in the pantograph, this is also the quilting screen. So we're placing the design on the screen, but then we're also going to quilt it out. So let's make our first marks. And because we're sewing off the edges, I'm going to use my trusty marker, and I want to move up and across off the side of the quilt, and I'm going to just pull it down. So is that too far off? Probably. I'm going to pull it in slightly, make sure that it's up and off, and then that's going to be my first mark, okay? So I'm going to just make a little single stitch, and as you can use a single stitch up above, and I'm going to pull it away, and make my first mark right there, and then I'm going to move across to the right side. I want to pull it down. I want to make sure that it's sewing off the edges. All right. I'm going to make a single stitch again, and okay, that's my other mark. That's my A and B. Okay, now with my marks, I can go and place my design. Now, if you're saying, well, why the heck did you place it? Why did you make those marks? Okay, these marks are going to save you, and they're going to also help you align your quilt correctly. So, now that I have my marks, I'm going to move my needle right over that little mark I made, and I'm going to tap on A. And here's where it says it's highly recommended for you to make these marks before you proceed on. And we're going to say, okay. So you'll notice that it's pushed it out of the safe area. That's okay, because I have a feeling that I'm coming in. I'll place it inside the safe area. All right, so as I make my B mark, we'll see. See, I pulled it into where I could quilt it, okay? It was placed outside, but now it's sewing off the edge, and now I can just move to start point. That's in your toolbox, so I can have it move to the start point. It takes a minute, sorry you guys, I could have pulled it over there. I just wanted you to see. So, now my start point's almost nearby. I'm going to use my single stitch right at the top of my screen. I'm not going to use my pull bobbin. Okay. And now we're going to sew it out, okay? And then you're just going to proceed all the way down, making your marks, then rolling, and then placing your design, and then quilting. And you'll do that all the way down your quilt. I'll get it started. But I can't wait to show you the finished results. I'm really excited to see how this design's going to sew out. So join me for the question and answer period. Make sure you come up with some really good ones because I love a good question. And I'll see you next time on Tuesdays with Grace. You take care. Bye.